Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Everyone, may I please ask you to type in to the chat window if you can hear me? Just type in, say, assalamu alaikum or something like that so I can confirm that you guys can hear me. Okay, I'm going to test once again. Can you guys, okay, you can hear me. Okay, excellent. Good. All right, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Welcome to the third weekly session. And I'm going to kick it off with a review of what we covered last time. Could you please just confirm how many of you were there the last time we went through Surah Naba? Can you just tell me? You can either raise your hand if you are with us on Zoom, or if you were live with us on Facebook. Okay, yeah, so I can see some people who are saying they were present. Okay, good. So if you were present, then you would remember, and if you weren't present, then this would be a good way for you to catch up with us. I'm quickly going to go through some of the points that we covered. So we start, first of all, with praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending salat and salam on his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Since we have 30 minutes, so I'm going to stick to the key points that I need to make. The last time we talked about Surah An-Naba, and point number one was people like to debate over whether there will indeed be a day of judgment. And the verse, Amma yatasa'alun, what is it that they're debating about? That's what it refers to. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then makes a logical argument by mentioning his signs for the thinking mind. That, all of this was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then he paints with the same brush the scene of that day as if it has already happened. So the language in the Quran is such that it's very profound. It's almost like it's written in the past, to the extent that it's definitive. It's almost as if it's already happened. And really, we said that for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these things have, there's no time, there's no past, present, future. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a definitive reality. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of the accountability of those who deny this reality, even though it's become obvious to them, and the outcome for those who affirm it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among them. And finally, Allah reminds us that those who are still alive, those of us who are still around, who have not gone into the next stage of our lives, which is the grave yet, we still can decide how we want to end up on the Day of Judgment. And that's what we discussed. And finally, I gave you guys homework. There was a very important thing that I asked you guys to try at least once a week. Now, the thing that I asked you to try was rather private. I will just remind you guys of it. You don't need to type in the chat window to say whether you did it or not. As long as you tried it, you would have seen the effect of it. The homework was, I wanted you to wake up before Fajr, at least once during the week, and pray 2 rakah and make dua. And that was something that I want you to try at least once. Hopefully some of you tried it, and if not, then I'm going to request that you guys try it this week. Hopefully some of you tried it more than once. I'm just going to emphasize that point with one underline, which is, if you keep doing it, there will come a time where you begin to feel the sweetness of your conversations with Allah. Those are conversations that are done very, very privately. No one knows about them. It's kind of in the dark. It's early, very, very early in the morning, even before Fajr. No one's around. And it allows you to fully concentrate on having really a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's just a request that if you didn't do it last week, then make sure you do it this week. We're going to continue this Saturday, inshallah. We're going to talk about Surah An-Nazi'at, which is the second surah in the 30th juz of the Quran. And as I had mentioned, my effort is that we will all become more comfortable with the relatively smaller surahs that we recite in prayer anyway, and become conscious of what those surahs mean. So, Surah Al-Nazi'at, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in this knowledge for us. It starts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swearing by something. Now, over here I've said angels. Understand that in the tafsir, there's more than one opinion. I'm going to just show you the translation and then very briefly talk about two major opinions. And then I'll simplify it for you with the opinion that I'm following here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and these verses are very powerful poetic language. It says, the surah goes, by those pulling, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by those pulling harshly, and those pulling out gently, and those gliding swiftly, and those taking the lead vigorously, like getting there first, and those conducting affairs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing by something that does all of this. So there's more than one explanation. The one that's followed by the majority of the Mufassirin is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about his angels. There's another one which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about horses in the desert, but I'm going to stick to the one which the majority of the ulama follow. And then you will see how this connects with the rest of the verse. By those pulling harshly, Allah's angels are sent to pull the soul of mankind, in some cases harshly, second verse, and those pulling up gently. When our life ends, this is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he described that depending on how we lived our lives, depending on the kind of relationship we had with Allah, the soul will either be pulled out like wet wool is pulled through thorns. You can just imagine how with lots of tearing taking place, very painful. Or it could be like the way a drop of water comes out of a water skin, which is very gentle. And in both cases, it is angels taking out the soul. So, وَالنَّازِعَاتِ غَرْقًا وَالنَّاشِطَاتِ نَشْطًا وَالسَّابِحَاتِ سَبْحًا. And those gliding swiftly, angels moving very quickly, فَالسَّابِقَاتِ سَبْقًا, and taking the lead or getting there first vigorously, angels moving very fast. And those conducting affairs according to whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered. Now, this surah is a psychological masterpiece. Allah knows our psychology better than any psychologist. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing out some flaws in our thinking by sharing evidence through logical arguments, by using language as a tool, and thirdly, by relating it to our lives. So one of the mistakes that we tend to make, human beings tend to make, is we tend to ignore what we cannot see with our own eyes. We, for example, cannot see what happens when people die. We see them dying, and if you have ever been around and very close to someone who passed away, think about what your feelings were at that time, other than the fact that you felt sad that the person was departing. What happens to them after they die? This is a question that children ask all the time. Even as adults, we should think about that question. What happens after that? What's happening to the person as the soul is being pulled out? I was with my father when he passed away. I was right next to him. I saw his soul being pulled out. I saw him going through that moment. And the body, it goes through some physical changes, but then there are other things happening that we cannot see. These are things that modern science cannot understand. There's a body today. It has all kinds of electrical impulses going through it. And those impulses are controlling the different muscles in the body. And then another moment, those electrical impulses are not being generated. Human beings, with all of their knowledge, do not understand. We need God's guidance to understand what's happening. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is presenting with us here. وَالنَّازِعَاتِ غَرْقًا وَالنَّاشِطَاتِ نَشْطًا وَالسَّابِحَاتِ سَبْحًا فَالسَّابِقَاتِ سَبْقًا فَالْمُدَبِّرَاتِ أَمْرًا. We don't have a lot of time, but I suggest that you look into what we know about angels. There are some very interesting books and lots of hadith. We know that we don't see angels, but there have been moments where the Prophet ﷺ saw the angel Jibreel, and there was a moment when one of his Sahaba, Sa'ad bin Mu'adh, he was reciting the Quran in the middle of the night in Medina, and he looked up and he saw a cloud that came very far down. And as soon as he looked up, then the cloud lifted up and left. And in the morning, he told the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said, yeah, those were angels. They obviously were impressed by your recitation of the Quran, and they came closer to listen. So sometimes, some people with the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have been exposed to angels, but the rest of us have not. But angels, the world of angels is this beautiful world, which we should know more about. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to spend time on it, but I encourage you guys to look into it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues in this surah, يَوْمَ تَرْجُفُ الرَّاجِفَةِ تَتْبَعُهَا الرَّادِفَةِ. So now we're talking about that day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is laying bare for us the scene of that day. Just like our life ends, and it's definite. We know it's going to end. The life will be over. We know it's going to end. Just like that, all life will end. My own individual life and all life on this planet will end. Like the angels that are invisible to us, that day is also invisible to us today. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that do some deep thinking. Consider the day when the quaking blast will come to pass. There will be this rajifa, this quaking blast, followed by a second blast. And I want to just emphasize for all of you, the day of judgment will come, or the hour will come upon people, which I really hope that none of us is among them, but we will all be affected by the second blast. We will all come out of our graves. We will all come back to life. قُلُوبُ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَاجِفَةٌ. Hearts on that day will be trembling. أَبْصَارُهَا خَاشِعَةٌ. With their eyes downcast. Allah continues, يَقُولُونَ أَإِنَّا لَمَرْدُودُونَ فِي الْحَافِرَةِ. They ask, will we really be restored to our former state? When Allah presents all of this information to them, this surah, by the way, came down in Mecca before Hijrah, and is the Quraysh who are being addressed here. And those are the people that Allah is talking about. And their example, the example of Quraysh, is very similar to the people that we come across all the time. Sometimes in our country and sometimes outside of our country as well. People who are not Muslim, sometimes people who at least by name are Muslim, but then they say things like that. Will we really be restored to our former state? And if it's a person who's genuinely interested in learning, that's fine. It's fair to ask that question. But if the person is just being argumentative because they don't want to face this reality, then they'll say things like, even after we've been reduced to decayed bones. This is what someone said to the Prophet ﷺ. This is mentioned in the last ruku of Surah Yasin as well, where the guy took this old animal bone and he broke it and blew at it, and he said, are we going to come back to life after we've become, dust from bones like this? قَالُوا تِلْكَ إِذًا كَرَّةٌ خَاسِرَةٌ. Then they say, then such a return would be a loss, meaning it's going to be a bad deal. The thinking is, everything's got to be some kind of a business deal. You either get benefit out of it or you don't get benefit out of it. So they're saying, in that case, if we're going to come back to life, that's a bad deal. Think of that kind of conversation. And then Allah describes, فَإِنَّمَا هِيَ زَجْرَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ. But indeed, it will take one mighty blast. One. That's it. You think it's going to be really hard to put all the atoms together, and they'll become cells, and then all the cells will be put together, and then the idea that we have about life, there's a baby, the baby grows up. No, Allah says no. فَإِنَّمَا هِيَ زَجْرَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ. One blast. It will be just one blast. فَإِذَا هُمْ بِالسَّاهِرَةِ. And at once they will be above ground. That's all of us. That's all of us. So when you're doing your homework, when you stand up in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the morning when there's no one around, I want you to think about yourself on that day. Because on that day, regardless of how big your family is, your tribe is, how large a company you own or run or work in, how big your posse is, does not really matter. On that day, you'll be alone. Just like in the morning when doing your homework, you'll be all alone. It's you and Allah. And at once, we will all be above ground. We make, some people I should say, make fun of this reality with arrogance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides these kinds of details throughout the Quran. And then, this is mistake number 2. The first mistake was ignoring what we cannot see. The second mistake is just arrogance. We are so good. We are so powerful. We have a great civilization. That word, by the way, I'm becoming allergic to that word because I hear it so often. People talk about our civilization. We need a civilizational difference. We need to emphasize the cultural nuances of our civilization. Yeah, you think your civilization is great. Of course, the people being addressed here are the Quraysh, but it also applies to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the example and giving Quraysh the example of the Fir'aun. It says, هل أتاك حديث موسى? You heard the story of Musa? Now, these are Quraysh who were not Jews. They did not believe in Musa. But they had just been in contact with the people of Yathrib and Khaybar. They had sent emissaries to them to find out that you guys, you're supposed to be these knowledgeable people. So you know that you have this knowledge of the book, you have these rabbis, you guys write a lot, you guys read a lot from the scriptures. Tell us something to respond to this guy Muhammad among us. Respond to him. So then Allah says, هل أتاك حديث موسى? Has the story of Moses reached you? Yeah, you guys have been doing your own surreptitious snooping around, right? إذ ناداه ربه بالواد المقدس طوى. His Lord called him on a sacred valley, on the sacred valley of Tuwa. Interestingly, Allah saying to them, all of those rabbis, whatever they told you, I'm going to tell you more because I was there. I was seeing everything. And this valley of Tuwa, by the way, people say it's in the desert of Sinai. The latest research says that it's in Western Saudi Arabia. Allahu Alam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Musa, اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Go to Pharaoh. This is Ramses II, most likely. Go to the Pharaoh, for he has truly transgressed all bounds. Again, I don't have a lot of time to go into the history of it. Learn about Ramses II and you will learn about some of the atrocities that he committed, some of the arrogance that he displayed, and how he was the only pharaoh among all the pharaohs. This is something that we know from modern Egyptology. He was the only pharaoh among all the pharaohs who declared himself to be a god. So he worshipped many gods, including himself. فَقُلْ هَلْ لَكَ إِلَىٰ أَن تَزَكَّى. But Allah SWT still gave him a chance and say, would you be willing to purify yourself? وَأَهْدِيَكَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَتَخْشَى. And let me guide you to your Lord so that you will be in awe of him. فَأَرَاهُ الْآيَةَ الْكُبْرَى. Then Moses showed him the great sign. And that's what Allah is saying, that I did all of that with Fir'aun, who was this amazing, powerful king. And he had been so cruel. But even then, I gave him a chance. And I'm giving you guys a chance. And indirectly, Allah SWT is saying it to us and to all mankind. I'm giving all of you a chance as well. But then what did Fir'aun do? فَكَذَّبَ وَعَصَى. But he denied. He disobeyed. ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ يَسْعَى. And then turned his back, striving against the truth. It's very pictorial. It's very vivid. That when people with nukhwa, when they're arrogant, they kind of turn their face and they say, no, I'm not gonna listen to that. Forget about that stuff. I'm not gonna listen to that. فحشر فنادى. Then he summoned his people and called out. فقال أنا ربكم الأعلى. Saying, I am your Lord, the Most High. فأخذه الله نكال الآخرة. So Allah overtook him, making him an example in this life and the next. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَعِبْرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى. Surely this is a lesson for whoever stands in awe of Allah. Now remember, these people had been to the Jews, so they knew what happened to Pharaoh. They knew that. They did not have the benefit of Egyptology, but they had the benefit of talking to the Jews and knew what had happened to Pharaoh. Resurrection that you guys think is going to be so hard. You think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot create you, or recreate you. Think about the first time you were created. Which one is harder? So the comparison is, Fir'aun was big, it's huge, because his civilization had these pyramids and Abu al-Hol, the Sphinx. You guys, in comparison to Fir'aun, you're nothing. But think about, you think Fir'aun was great? Think about Allah and how great Allah is in his creation. And then you will see how easy resurrection will be for him. أَأَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ خَلْقًا أَمِ السَّمَاءَ. Which is harder to create, you or the sky that Allah built? رَفَعَ سَمْكَهَا فَسَوَّاهَا. Raising it high and forming it flawlessly. Really, if you stand outside today, after this thing is over, just go outside, stand, look at the sky. Just look around you, look at the trees, just look around the grandeur of this world that Allah has created around us. It's mind-bogglingly awesome. It's amazing. وَأَغْطَشَ لَيْلَهَا وَأَخْرَجَ ضُحَاهَا. He dimmed its night and brought forth its daylight. وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَاهَا. As for the earth, he spread it out as well. He spread out the earth. If he wanted, it would be different. It would have been very difficult for us to walk on the earth, but Allah spread it out for us. أخرج منها ماءها ومرعاها, bringing forth its water and pastures. Again, these are things we take for granted, which we shouldn't. These are blessings, and Allah made things easy for us in this world. وَالْجِبَالَ أَرْسَاهَا, and setting the mountains firmly, which if they were not there, then like we had seen in the Surah An-Naba last week. وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put mountains as pegs. So it's the same thing is being talked about here. مَتَاعًا لَكُمْ وَلِأَنْعَامِكُمْ. All as a sustenance for you and for your animals. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made all of this from nothing. There was nothing and then there was something. That has got to be harder than recreating something that was already there. Isn't it? That's like a logical argument that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making. So, why does all of this matter? فَإِذَا جَاءَتِ الطَّامَةُ الْكُبْرَى, but when the supreme disaster comes to pass, يَوْمَ يَتَذَكَّرُ الْإِنسَانُ مَا سَعَى. The day every person will remember all that they worked for, everything that we strived for. Whatever is important for us in this world, we will remember it on that day. Allah mentioned earlier that all of us suddenly will be standing out. We will all be standing on that day. We'll all be thinking, what did I do? What did I do in this world? وَبُرِّزَتِ الْجَحِيمُ لِمَنْ يَرَى. And the hellfire will be displayed for all to see. We will all see it. You and I, we will all see it with our own eyes. فَأَمَّا مَنْ طَغَى. As for those who transgress, just like Fir'aun, just like some people among the Quraysh, just like some people among us. فَأَمَّا مَنْ طَغَى وَآثَرَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. Okay, why does transgressing happen? It's because some of us prefer the life of this world. Yeah, we recognize there's going to be something after that. Who's seen all of that? Let's stick to what we already have in front of us. I see it, I smell it, I can feel it and touch it, I can taste it. That's what matters more. That's the life of this world. If that's what we stick to, then obviously we'll become among the transgressors. May Allah not make us among them. فَإِنَّ الْجَحِيمَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. And hellfire will certainly be home for people like that. And as for those, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. And as for those who were in awe of standing before their Lord and restrained themselves from desires, pull back. Allah does not tell us to completely, abandon them, but pull back. Choose, pick and choose where you can do what, based on what Allah has permitted and not. فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. Paradise will certainly be home. That's the real home, folks. That's the home. And that brings us to mistake number 3 that Allah points out in this surah. The third mistake, which is what we focus on. Yeah, sure, we know this, but what are we focusing on? What is most important to us? Whatever we focus on is what we work towards. We have multiple goals, but what is the main focus? We have multiple things to do in this world. We have multiple responsibilities, but what is the main focus? يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ السَّاعَةِ أَيَّانَ مُرْسَاهَا. They ask you regarding the hour, when will it be? فِيمَ أَنْتَ مِنْ ذِكْرَاهَا. But it is not for you to tell its time. إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ مُنْتَهَاهَا. That knowledge rests with your Lord. Basically, Allah is saying, what does it matter when it will be? What matters is, what are you doing with the time that you have? Focus on what matters. إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُنْذِرُ مَنْ يَخْشَاهَا. Your duty. This is for the Prophet ﷺ and for you and me. Your duty is only to warn whoever is in awe of it. That's what I'm doing, and that's frankly your homework for this week as well. Pass from the Prophet ﷺ even one verse, just one verse, communicate it to someone else. That's our duty. كَأَنَّهُمْ يَوْمَ يَرَوْنَهَا لَمْ يَلْبَثُوا إِلَّا عَشِيَّةً أَوْ ضُحَاهَا. On that day, when we think about whatever life we spent in this world, it will be as if we had been in this world only for an evening or maybe a morning or something like that, an hour or two. That's it. That's what the life of this world will seem like at that time. So focus on what matters. The duration of this life is not very long. Focus on what matters. Whatever we focus on is what we will get. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in this surah. This is Surah An-Nazi'at. I'm going to share with you guys this link. And here's what I want you to do. That's going to be our homework. This is the recitation of Surah An-Nazi'at by Ra'ad al-Kurdi. This is a YouTube video. Beautiful recitation. The kind that makes you cry. So listen to this. Try and memorize this surah. And the third one is find one person, at least, during this week that you can pass on this information to. Whatever we learned today, find one person that you can pass this on to. That's the homework for this week. I will stop here. We have a few minutes, and I'm open for questions. Go ahead and type in your questions. Any questions? Okay, what is the take-home lesson for an individual? All right, so the take-home lesson, as I had mentioned, were three things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points out, three kinds of mistakes that human beings tend to make. The first mistake is that we ignore what we cannot see with our eyes. So the take-home lesson from that will be to start to think about things that are not visible to our eyes but exist, like Allah, like Allah's creation that we cannot see, the angels among them, like the Day of Judgment. So that's lesson number one. Take-home lesson number two is that we think too highly of ourselves. That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking about Fir'aun. So humility is the take-home lesson from that mistake. And the third mistake is that we tend to not focus on what matters. We start worrying about unnecessary details. So focus on what matters the most. Those are three take-home lessons. The next question, how can we relate the oath with this discussion, like oath and whole surah? Oath. Are you talking about the alast? The alast, is that what you're talking about? Is that the oath you're talking about? Sister, I'm not clear which oath you're referring to. Oh, the oath being taken at the start. Oh, right. The oath, which is the which is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears upon the angels, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears upon something which many Mufassirin think are the angels. Okay, your question was, how can we relate the oath with this discussion like the oath? Okay, sure. So the connection is this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing upon something that has an effect on our lives, but we don't see that thing with our eyes. The angels have a direct effect on us. So here, several different things that angels do are being mentioned. Number one, the fact that they take the soul out, either for the, in a harsh manner or in a very soft manner. Second one, the control of the winds. So we know that Mikael alayhi salam is responsible for that. And thirdly, many other things like protecting human beings. That's another job that the angels have. Recording our deeds. That's another job that the angels have. There are angels everywhere doing all these kinds of things. We don't see them, but they actually have a direct impact on our lives. By Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swearing upon those as something which is unseen, and then the Day of Judgment, which is also unseen. So if we just follow the logical conclusion that some things are happening around us that we cannot explain, there are some invisible things that are doing those, that are making those events possible. Just like that, at the end of our lives, when we die, there will eventually be a day of judgment that we will come to. So it's about the things that are unseen. And the day of judgment is also a thing that is unseen. I hope that answers the question. Yes, correct. That is correct. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So I'm assuming there are no other questions. With that, I will wrap up the session. If there are questions on Facebook Live, I'm sorry, I cannot see them at this time. My perhaps Isa, if you are able to see them, if you can type them up here, I'd appreciate it. If there are questions on Facebook. All right, I'm assuming that there are none. All right, good. So Jazakumullah khair, please remember your homework and also remember the one that I mentioned from last time, which is um, waking up in the morning before Fajr and praying. Yes, I will share the slides within an hour or so, inshallah, and then Isa will help us put them in the group. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah SWT accept from us and from you. And since this is kind of like a gathering, my request is that we all recite Surah Al-Asr as we're ending this.